Hey guys, this is the Wiggleman and welcome back to Wiggle's Miniature Workshop. Starting off this video with a quick introduction because I realised I went far too quickly into it when I was recording. In this video we're going to be doing a lot of sponging to get a really nice looking skin effect. In the video I use a little technique that kind of inspired this whole video itself as to how to make sponging a little more easier to do, a little nicer to do. I particularly don't like using tweezers while sponging, so I had a thought. I had a spare pin vise kicking around, and all I simply did was took off a bit of sponge and put it inside of the pin vise. So this short little introduction here is just to kind of explain exactly what's going on in the video for the first couple of steps on the model we are about to paint. And I hope you stick around because it's I'm very proud of how the model came out. I think it looks very good. All you do is you get your pin vise, you open it up as much as possible. Other way. And you just put a little bit of sponge inside of there and you tighten it up. And there you go, now you've got a nice kind of easy to use, easy to dab bit of sponge on the end of your pin vise. Just make sure that when you're done with it at the end of your painting session that you do in fact take the sponge out, give your pin vise a bit of a clean, because if you leave it in there it will clog it up. But anyway, thank you for watching this quick little intro. Now let's get on with the painting. Thanks for that intro, Camera Wiggle. So, we're going to start off painting this Lord of Plagues by applying a dark flesh tone to our spongy brush. It's a simple case of we're going to saturate the model quite heavily. We're going to go over a black primer. We're going to try and get as much coverage as possible, but still leave some of the darkest, deepest recesses. You can see to begin with, I was just patting the model with the dark flesh tone. However, as we moved on a bit, I wanted a bit more coverage and I used it as more of a brushing motion. One thing I think is important noting whilst doing this is that we're not going for the exact colours that I'm using here. I feel like you could use any dark skin tone, and as long as you're stepping up in 3 different highlights, that's going to give kind of an effective look to the model. As long as you're going for some kind of a skin tone effect, it should look convincing enough. And for my hawk-eyed viewers, you might have noticed that we're not actually in Wiggle's Miniature Workshop currently. It is the summertime in the UK, and while it's a miserable summer at the moment, it makes the workshop get incredibly warm, which is part of the explanation as to why I've not released any videos in quite some time. Even on a 20-degree day, that shed gets up to about 30 to 35 degrees, which is not a fun painting environment. So I've moved everything upstairs, I've moved it to the other room, and we're doing some good old brush-based painting. So now we're putting on our 3rd layer onto the model through sponging, and you'll notice that we apply it to less and less areas as we kind of progress up the highlighting steps. It's okay to stop here if you want, but I feel like the model pops with that 4th layer, which we're going into now. It's also important to remember as we kind of get to these lighter layers that we're taking off more and more excess from the sponge before we start sponging, and that allows us to apply less and less paint. So with the foundation laying down for our skin tones, we're going to move on to the armour. Here I'm applying a sombre grey base coat to the armour. Looking back on this in retrospect, I feel like it would have been better as a sombre grey mixed with black to give it a darker kind of undertone, because we're going to go directly into highlighting the armour with green after this step. We're laying down this foundation just with a brush, however once we start adding the green onto the model we're going to do it using the sponging method. So with some dark green applied to our sponge and the excess removed, you can see here that sponging onto a model using my little pin vise technique here is actually quite safe, even when you've got other areas of the model painted. Throughout the whole project, I think the only area that I really hit while sponging the model was one of his fingers, and that was a very quick highlight job just to hide that fact. For the 2nd layer with the green, we sponge on some camouflage green, and now you can really begin to see the effect that it's having on the armour itself. It's giving it that kind of baseline of a green that we're going to then highlight on with another layer on top of. And for the final highlight layer that we're going to use whilst sponging on the armour is friend of the channel, Escorpina Green. I just love using this colour when it comes to Nurgle models. It's almost fluorescent. It's a very, very greeny green. No better way of expressing it, really. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic colour. It really makes Nurgle models pop. So after we sponge the armour, we go back with Escorpina Green onto the brush, and we use it just to define some edges on the armour. Define a bit more definition on the armour, I guess. We're just going around kind of sharp points around the knee pads, around the back of the ankle, the thing that's sticking out from there, around the ridges on his feet, and also around the edges of the shoulder pads. It's not necessarily a edge highlight everything. One of the things I want to avoid whenever I paint on this channel is edge highlighting, because I feel like I always do it messily, but it just gives the model a little bit more of a pop. It allows the armour to kind of, gives it an outline up against the skin. And doing it through this method means that we don't have to be precise. We can be messy, we can be sparing, but still have an overall positive effect on the model itself. Now, going back to the skin, we take our highest skin tone highlight colour that we use while sponging, and we thin that down with a fair amount of either water or glaze medium. I'm using glaze medium here, taking the excess off of our brush, and we're just kind of sketching over the areas where we've hit it at the highest level with the highlights. So it's quite easy to see once you've kind of sponged it in. You can use that as a guide as to where to highlight. So it's a very simple procedure, and this just helps to tie the model together. I wanted to go for kind of a big bloaty sweaty effect, and I just wanted to get this glaze layer in as kind of a sheen on top of the skin. Disgusting, I know. So moving on to the helmet now, we are taking a 50-50 mix of cold grey and Vallejo model colour black. We're using that just to put down a base coat onto the helmet, being very careful not to go inside his three little eye holes, because we want them to remain completely black for the effect, to give it the helmet more depth. And if you've made it this far into the video, please don't forget to subscribe, give us a like. It gives me encouragement, it makes me want to make more of these videos. I am well into my next project as well, so hopefully not long after this one, the next video will be up soon. Back to the sponging again, we're taking just pure cold grey, and we're sponging it around the top areas and around the rim of the bottom of the helmet. And once more, we're using a 50-50 mix of pure white and cold grey. We then take that 50-50 mix of white and cold grey, and we apply it around all of the sharp points and the edges on the helmet. So down the bridge of the nose of the helmet, around the base of the helmet, and just in around the bottom of his little eye holes as well, just to try and make everything pop that little bit more. We then get a dark blue shade or an ink, and we apply it around like where his jawline would essentially be. I went a little bit too heavy-handed with this first layer. You'll see in the next clip that I went to feather it out, because the line between kind of the base coat and the dark blue wash was it was a bit too stark. So here I am going over with it with water, trying my best to feather it out. It doesn't look as bad on video, but it looked awful when I was actually painting it. At this point, I feel comfortable enough to put the helmet onto the model, and we do one final highlight using pure white, once again going over the sharpest areas of the helmet itself, just to make it stand out that little bit more. I also add some of this pure white just to the tippy top of his helmet, just to give it kind of an effect that there's scratches, add a bit of texture to the helmet itself. So for the wood on the grip of his axe, we actually use Vallejo Game Colour Smoky Ink. You can use contrast paints, any browns that you have available. This one for me was just a very quick way to get a nice brown colour onto the wooden handle. So for all of his boils and sores, we're going to use Vallejo Express Deep Purple. Any kind of magenta-y, either wash or contrast or express or army painter speed paint will work just as well, because we've got that pale flesh tone as a base layer. It'll go on top of it quite nicely. And when applying it, we're just being very, very careful just to keep the fluid paint within the lines. It's a very, very simple process. Not particularly one that you want to mess up, though. You have to have quite a bit of brush control here. Now, for all of his spiky bits around his shoulders and his little horn coming out of his head, we're going to base coat all those areas in khaki. Then we're going to come back to those later. If you've seen any of my videos before, it's a very similar technique that I use to painting teeth. It just works for me. Now, moving on to his little belly drop, the little drop he's got coming out of his belly over his axe. We're going straight in with the Escorpina green and using that as the base colour to really, really make it stand out, really draw attention to his gross little belly droplet. And then we simply just give it a little highlight using Vallejo Air Colour Livery Green. This is a very, very yellowy green. Really, really stands out as a highlight as well. I used it last in the Demon Hunter project, one of my very first videos. That's the last time you've seen that. Now, with pretty much the model not far off being completed, this part of the video we're going to go into using some more technical paints that I've got in my arsenal. So we are using Dirty Down Rust, and we are applying that to all kind of the pockmarked areas inside of the axe to give it a rusty, corroded looking effect. And we're just laying it down initially. We're also putting some on the chainmail around the front and the back of him as well. And we put a little bit in one of his eye holes so it looks like he's got a rusty tear coming down, because I thought it would look cool. And then once the Dirty Down Rust has dried out, we go back over it with water, because it is reactivated by water. That is the magic of this stuff. And we go over all the hard edges with the water just to feather it out, help it to blend within the rest of the metallics a little bit better. And it helps to kind of enhance that teardrop effect that we were going for earlier as well. Using the Dirty Down products, it is a very kind of trial and error process of using it. There's quite a lot of going back and forth where I'm feathering it out, then I apply a bit more paint, I feather that out, apply a bit more paint, back and forth, back and forth. There's no one answer as to the process of doing it. I just find just having a play with it, letting the paint do the work for you, and then trying to adjust anything that you don't like the look of after the fact. We add some copper brown Vallejo Express contrast paint, and we just draw that around the leather straps around the model. There's not too much to this, it's just once again paint within the lines using contrast paint. Now we're switching over to the Villainy inks. Thank you, by the way, for everyone who watched my Villainy ink review. That is, within 3 months, become one of my best performing videos on the channel. So thank you very much. If you've not seen it, go see my Villainy ink review. I still pretty much stand by what I said in the interview. It's not particularly ideal for pushing through an airbrush because it does block up airbrushes very easily. However, I do think it's a really good enamel product to use. The interesting thing that we're using the Carroburg Crimson equivalent. We're using the red one. The name eludes me currently. But the interesting thing about that one in particular is that it seems to have little particles, like little bits of particulate that remain after you brush it down, and it gives this effect of little tiny blood spatters, and I really, really like it. Because I really think that kind of helps sell the fact that these things have sprouted out of him. There's kind of remnants of gore left on his little shoulder spiky pads. But enough about talking about horrible mutilation. Now we move on to doing a 50-50 mix of bone white and khaki, and we start highlighting his little spiky bits and his little horn as well. And then we finish off with a final highlight of just the bone white at the tippy tops of his horn and his spiky bits. So we're coming up towards the end of the video now. We're coming to the grand reveal. I don't go over the painting process for the base on this model, but I would just like to say, if you've watched it this far, thank you very much. It is appreciated. We are back, baby, so to speak. do expect more videos coming on the channel. I won't be posting super duper frequently because it gets a little bit burnouty if I try to post quickly in succession. But I do enjoy this as a hobby. I do enjoy you as an audience. And yeah, thank you very much for watching anyway. That's me yapping for the day. Have a lovely afternoon, have a lovely evening, and bye-bye for now. Bye!